Hello, good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar on the augmented workforce and the future of work. Pleasure to be facilitating this session with Gary Kildare, the Chief HR Officer of IBM Europe. As a quick introduction as your facilitator, my name's Edwin Arbel. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Hive Learning. Hive Learning is a collaborative learning platform for leaders, teams and organizations. We help global organizations drive impactful behavior change at scale. If you wanted to learn more about us, just visit hivelearning.com. To get started, I wanted to just go through a couple of ground rules. At the bottom of your screen are multiple application widgets you can use. All the widgets are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around and get the most of your desktop space. You can also expand your slide area, maximize it to full screen by clicking on the arrows in the top right corner. If you have any questions during the webcast, this is the most important thing and valuable takeaway for you all. You can ask Q&A that Gary will cover at the close of his presentation, and we'll try to get round to as many as we possibly can. As a reminder, an on-demand version of the webcast will be available approximately 24 hours after the webcast, and it can be accessed through the same link that was sent over to you earlier. With that in mind, I wanted to pass over to the main event, which is Gary Kildare, as mentioned, the Chief HR Officer of IBM Europe. Quick bio on Gary. He has led transformational change, reflecting technology and market shifts from software and services to social, mobile, digital, and the emerging artificial intelligence, which is a big focus on today's topic. In the next 15 to 20 minutes, Gary's going to be covering the augmented workforce, the future of work. So we're going to be looking at some deep insights around AI, cognitive thinking, and how we transform the way we work and how things will evolve and predictions for the coming years. With that, I want to pass over to Gary, and he'll be commencing his talk. Please feel free, as mentioned, to add questions into the Q&A.
Edwin, hi. Thank you for the introduction. And good afternoon to everyone. I know we have a lot of people on the call today. I'm very grateful for you all joining. It gives me someone to talk to, an audience to talk to. I'm delighted to have the chance to talk about this subject, augmented workforce and the future of work. As Edwin mentioned, I'm going to chat for maybe about 15 minutes or so, and then hopefully there are some questions that you have that we can talk about for the remaining time. There are no charts today. I've kept it really very simple, and I want to basically draw on a number of kind of sources and studies and inputs, including IBM, in order to offer a point of view. There are a whole range of organizations and industries that are on the call. You may have a different point of view, and I'd be delighted to hear from you or to hear some of the questions about that. But maybe let me begin with the term cognitive rather than AI and explain why that is. And there's possibly a couple of elements I'd like to bring into the conversation around that. First of all, there is a difference between consumer AI and business AI. Consumer AI is what you and I can gather and can gain insights on as ordinary citizens. It's the data and the information that we have access to as ordinary citizens. And that's interesting, but when we look at it in terms of augmented or artificial intelligence, it's really not much more than a sophisticated kind of internet search that might have some voice or speech capability. Where things begin to get much more interesting is in the area of business AI. And this is where the insights, the data, the information, the expertise that's contained within organizations, within industries, what is the so-called dark data that we cannot access as ordinary citizens, but organizations can. That's the source of business AI and huge advantage. Now, I use the word augmented because the IBM purpose around AI is that we're looking to develop cognitive systems that are used to augment human intelligence. So our technology, our products, our services, and indeed the policies that we have are being designed to enhance and to extend human capability, expertise, and potential. It's not about replacing human beings or human endeavor. It's about supporting it and augmenting it. I make that distinction at the beginning because I think it's pretty important and certainly relevant to the discussion that we're having. So artificial intelligence is on the verge of penetrating every major industry, from healthcare to advertising to transportation, finance, legal, education, and also inside the workplace. I'm sure many of us have already interacted with a chatbot or a robot. And when I was looking at some of the quotes, I noticed that David Marcus, who's one of the Facebook vice presidents, said that they have already 100,000 bots on the Facebook Messenger platform. And that's a threefold increase from 2016. A recent survey of 350 HR leaders conducted by ServiceNow finds that 92% of HR leaders agree that the future of providing an enhanced level of employee service is going to include chatbots. And you might even think that the newest member of your HR team is going to be a chatbot. That's certainly the case in my organization, and you may be starting to see that too, because they can relatively easily answer all the questions, the frequently asked questions that we get. That ServiceNow survey also said that more than 2/3 of HR leaders believe employees are comfortable accessing bots to get information they need at the time they need it. The type of questions that HR leaders believe employees are comfortable using a bot for range from the mundane, the everyday, the frequent, and the factual ones, such as how much time off do I have, to the personal ones, such as reporting a grievance or misconduct. Capital Group HR, on their journey to digital transformation, their Senior Vice President of HR, Diana Wong, talks about technology as an enabler to delivering world-class advisor and information experiences to our customers. And she believes that HR must mirror these best-in-class experiences by leveraging AI for all phases of the employee life cycle, from recruiting to onboarding to development. She also believes that piloting and usage of artificial intelligence not only improves efficiency and effectiveness of the experience, but also allows her organization to be seen as a modern employer with millennial workers. There's a however in here though, and underpinning the positives is the fear of job loss among HR team members. The lack of skills to embrace the new technologies and the change management needed to adapt to new ways of working, recruiting, and engaging. Now, with that kind of said as my opening, for IBM, I wanted to talk a little bit about principles because HR teams are renowned for establishing the policies and the principles of the way we operate. Every change in technology carries major implications, and AI at the moment raises many questions that organizations can't answer, and that's going to take more time, it will take more research and require more openness. But for IBM, the new generation of technology will soon touch every aspect of work and life, and it will potentially transform things for the better. We call our cognitive capability Watson, and Watson can reason, it can look and examine the data, it understands, it forms hypotheses and judgments. But most importantly, these systems are not simply programmed. They are learning from their own experiences and from their interactions with humans and the outcomes of their judgment. And because of that, it's very important that we're clear on principles. So the purpose of AI, as I've already talked about, is to augment human intelligence, not to replace it. Secondly, in terms of principles, we need to make sure that people have confidence in the recommendations and the judgments of AI. So when and for what purposes AI is being used, how it's being applied, what the solutions are, how it is being deployed, are things that should be made clear to the people who use it and interact with it. The sources of data and the expertise that form the insights of these cognitive solutions, as well as the methods and what's being used to train those systems, should also be something that's made transparent to clients and to users. And lastly, in terms of the ownership of the business models and the intellectual property, it's important, again, that those are owned by the clients, that the client's work is protected, it is their data, their insights, rather than the AI on its own. So, having said a few things then, maybe just by way of introduction, I wanted to reference a few other pieces, and then I'll kind of try and tie it together. I wanted to reference Josh Bernson because he spoke recently at an HRD summit, and he challenged, he looked at the world in which we were operating, and he was challenging leaders about what they needed to change. And he referenced 5 or 6 things in there, and I will cover them very quickly. He talked about a new organizational structure, that a huge issue for companies is the inability to operate digitally because they have an organizational structure that stifles it. So I guess one of the things I would say is the structure enabling for all of this digital change that we're talking about? Josh also talked about reinventing management, that we need managers and leaders that are going to be empowering of people, that build teams, that coach people, and importantly, they collect feedback. They're not interested in being a boss. So it's a different type of leader than we've had in the past. He referenced employee experience, that the issues that affect people at work, the employee experience they have is crucial, and that culture is going to be a fairly significant part of that. He also talked about a career overhaul. We need to build better career models and consider the aging workforce and how we can find roles for more senior people and the sort of contrast between technology and soft skills in this. And lastly, he talked about embracing new technology and integrating that with the new systems that we have, the systems of engagement, the systems of record, the systems of insight, so that we can be smart in what we are doing. So let me shift then to a study that was done by IBM looking at chief executives, C-suite executives at the end of last year. And it was asking about what they would do in terms of digital reinvention of their enterprises, what they would do with artificial intelligence, how they would automate, how they would use the Internet of Things to embed sensors, how they would deliver better and more innovative customer experiences. And there was a pattern in the 3,000 conversations with chief executives that fell out, and I want to sort of share that with you. The pattern basically segmented the respondents into 4 groupings. The first of the groupings were the reinventors, and this was about 11% of the C execs that took part in the study. These are people and organizations that take a strategic approach to enabling their enterprise with AI. They're solving complex issues, they're infusing intelligent capabilities into processes, they're investing to create a new and preferred future, and they are designing their enterprise to reflect all of that. New operating models, innovation as part of an ecosystem, and they tend to act in concerts with an extended network of partners to continuously reinvent their business. The second group were the tacticians. About 28% of those were in that category that were surveyed. They are a group that are updating select activities with AI solutions. So they're remodeling parts of their business, but they're less focused on applying the technology to remake or reinvent their enterprise. And they're a bit more insular and less likely to collaborate. The third grouping was the aspirationals, about 23% of them. And they are still plotting their first foray into AI. They like to use it, they plan to use it, they're thinking about what they will do with it, they're facing industry convergence, they're seeing a rise in cyber risks, shifting consumer preferences, and they are aspirational about what AI can do for them. The last group are the observers, and about 40% of the CEOs fall into that grouping. These are the ones that have not yet adopted AI. A few of them have been impacted by disruption and disruptive forces, and for the most part, they tend to remain on the sidelines of everything that is happening. So, just trying to tie some of this together a little bit quickly and then give time to some questions. The workforce is facing problems today as businesses become increasingly complex. Demands to meet ever-changing talent needs, changing workforce demographics and expectations, the onslaught and the exponential growth of new technology and data, and the dark data insights, globalization and virtualization, continued cost pressures because they don't go away, and a contingent workforce. So organizations and businesses constantly need to be shifting the right skills, increasingly short shelf life and highly competitive talent, They need to create engaging, great employee experiences for a population whose expectations are shaped outside of the workplace, not within it. They need to accelerate digital transformation to use tools and data such as mobile and social. They often need to optimize around whether it's a country, a market, a geography, or the world, in both traditional workspaces and virtually. And lastly, they need to drive down the cost of HR structure. So 5 practices I would leave you with to think about in terms of how to design meaningful experiences for the digital era and the cognitive era. First of all, can you personalize? Can you create a fit between the needs of the employee and the needs of the organization? Secondly, transparency. How can you improve visibility for employee and employer? Thirdly, simplicity. How do you streamline? How do you remove non-added value activities? Fourthly, authenticity. Can you align experiences to the culture and the value system of your organization? And lastly, responsiveness. Are you allowing both the employee and the employer to share information? Do you have listening in your organization? And can people co-create? So, a few thoughts, some points of view. I hope I've covered as broadly as I can in the time allowed. And maybe now, Edwin, we could offer a few questions and try and come back to them.
Great, thank you, Gary. I hope the audience found that quite interesting. We've got the questions Q&A form available, so if you've got any Q&A or things you wanted to dig into in a little bit more depth, please do add them into there, and obviously Gary has got time now to go through those and answer them. We have a couple of questions to kick off with, which I'll go through. So the first one is it's quite interesting one. It covers the topic of AI specifically. And the question here is, there is a lot of scientific knowledge available for a long time, and it's poorly used in organizations. For example, many organizations base their hiring decisions still predominantly on interviews. Why is the expectation that organizations will have more confidence in technology, AI, than specifically in science? So that's a good punchy one, Gary, for you.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the time, when it comes to interviewing as an HR professional, then what I would want to see is as much information and as many perspectives as possible on candidates, whether that's at the very beginning stage to attract people that I think would be of interest with the right skills and fit to my organization, or as you start to sift all the way through. I think we're all kind of familiar with things like LinkedIn, with what search firms do and search and headhunters do. Technology allows a lot more capability when you consider that cognitive capability can read and digest much more data than human beings can. Then it's possible to look at completely different audience. It's possible to go to be a hunter in the marketplace rather than to place an ad and wait for someone to apply for it. You can go prospecting, looking for the skills, and you can use the technology that is around and many recruiters are using to be able to give an edge. I think the challenge for organizations will be that if you're relying on more traditional means, there's nothing wrong with that, but you may find other organizations are adopting it much more quickly and are going to get to decision making more quickly and may have a more diverse population and skill set that they are looking for. That'd be my first quick answer on that.
Great. Thanks, Gary. And a question from me, actually, before we go on to another one. With regards to AI, what do you believe is the critical challenge AI will help us solve in the workplace?
I think it will help us solve a lot of challenges in the workplace. I mean, if you get to brass tacks on it, there are many papers being written that would say anything that can be disaggregated to a mathematical equation or an algorithm could be done by a computer or by technology. Technology is very good at large amounts of data, processing, and looking for patterns. Human beings are very good at intuition, at judgment. And the combination of those two things will allow us to move much faster than we're currently moving. And I can envisage a time that, and it's here, I have it in my organization, when I will have a Watson assistant, a Watson recruiting assistant, a Watson onboarding assistant. But equally, I could see it in other environments, a Watson tax assistant, a Watson accounting assistant, a Watson medical assistant, a Watson legal assistant. Everywhere that there are vast amounts of data, the technology can help to give insights that you might never be able to find as a human being.
Okay, thanks. And another question came in, actually. It's on a very similar theme on the AI topic, but it narrows down, really hones in on more of the functional role. And that's, where do you believe AI will actually have the largest impact for the CHRO or the HR leader?
So, I mean, it touches everything. The talent is a big area. It's a very broad subject. And if you break it into its component parts, then, the idea of recruiting, acquisition of people is definitely an area where the technology can examine free text. It can examine sentiment. It can look at what people have written in articles or in letters, free-form text. It can read it, it can understand it, it can highlight patterns of people that might be of interest to you and your organization. In the area of onboarding, I come from a large organization of over 400,000 people. About 47% of them are millennials and joined us in the last couple of years. There are many questions. If any of you remember when you joined an organization, and for some of you that may have been recent, you're often told, here's someone you can go to with questions. But most human beings only want to ask someone or bother them for a short amount of time. It might be a few days, a few weeks, or something really big. But in a new organization, you may literally have hundreds of questions. Where is this? How do I get that? Who should I talk to on this? What's the performance management appraisal? How much vacation do I get? How do I calculate this? All of these things can be done by bots, by assistants, and be done very efficiently. We come to learning, where it's possible to figure out and personalize learning for each of us as individuals. Most of us are craving to be treated as individuals, Therefore, having technology that allows you as a person to be identified within your company, which may be very large, and for learning to be tailored and personalized and pushed to you rather than you having to work it out or talk to 5 people or talk to your manager or your supervisor to figure out what you should do, is absolutely incredible. And career discussions are becoming more complicated because the order in which many of the previous generations want to do things is not the way that most millennials want to do things. They want their own path. They may consider outside and inside, and they need some help in navigating on what is actually possible. So these are all ways I can see it. We introduced, incidentally, a new performance management tool about 2 years ago. And introducing anything new to 400,000 people generates a lot of questions. Being able to use artificial intelligence and augmented intelligence to answer all these questions, fantastic. Fantastic. Don't need to have a human being do it at all. Human beings can train and they can help the technology to move quickly, but then you don't need a human being to do that.
Great stuff. Thank you, Gary. The next question actually touches upon the categorizations in the, I believe it was the leadership report, and on the 40% of observers. So the question here is, can you specify what those disruptive forces were that were affecting the 40% observers to adopting artificial intelligence?
I'm not sure I'm following the question exactly. I mean, basically, there is not an industry or segment that is not currently being disrupted. Workers are expecting more. Technology is transforming. The workforce composition is changing. So there are many factors, and we are living in a period of time where you're either a disruptor or you're being disrupted. And I guess what the study was saying from the end of last year is that some of the chief executives that were surveyed, some of them recognize all of these forces that are at work and are positioning their organizations to reinvent. Others are tacticians. They're dipping toes in the water. They're being selective. A third is talking about it and plotting and planning what they will do, and they are aspirational. And that fourth group, which is still a big number, some close to 40%, are observers. So they are not feeling, or at least they feel comfortable and are not feeling that there is a disruptive force that is pushing them to move more quickly. And I would respectfully suggest that if we run that study now or in another 6 months' time, that number will change and many of them will start to worry. There was another study I can't remember just off the top of my head, but it was looking again at what was keeping CEOs awake at night. And the one fact I took away from it was most CEOs were not worried about the competition that they knew. They slept uneasily about the competition that they didn't know, that someone would jump into their market, their industry, their space that they hadn't conceived of and didn't think about. And I'm sure some of us know either of parts of our organization or others that are choosing to go into different places. Banks that are reinventing themselves as telcos or telcos as banks. Organizations that are deliberately getting out of particular businesses and investing in others. So I think we're seeing a quickening of all of those things happening at the moment. And, the reinventors are leading the pack. The tacticians are selective. The aspirationals are looking to the future and thinking and plotting, but haven't done it. And the observers are kind of dragging a little bit behind, is the way I would see it, and thinking they're going to be okay, but I wouldn't like personally to be in that group.
Okay, I think you did a far better job of answering that question than I did positioning it, Pat. So thanks for that. Thanks, Jaco. Actually, the next question links to it, so I thought we'd move to that one very quickly because it was one of the categories. Were there any common traits on company size or sector for the reinventors?
Could you just repeat that one more time? Because I just didn't catch the end of what you said.
Sure. It was, were there any common traits on the company size or the sector for the reinventors?
No. There were 3,000 companies across basically every industry. Every industry was represented in that. And I think it would be wrong to assume that there are industries that are either immune from change or disruption and others that are not. I'm speaking from the position, I guess, of a technology company. So what I want to try to make sure of is that we're able to use the tools and technology and try and pilot. But everything from public sector through manufacturing industries that are being transformed by products, by IoT, the Internet of Things, and connectedness and devices that are able to sense and to respond, through education industries, retail, which I think every one of us can see changing in front of our eyes. I think there's not an industry or sector that is untouched at the moment in it. So some may be moving faster, but I don't think it's an industry statement. I think it's an organizational one, that some organizations are choosing to move faster. And a long time ago, I remember reading reports that used to talk about, big companies would take over small companies. And then I read reports that said small companies will eat big companies. And now I think we're in the point where fast companies will beat slow companies. And so maybe that's the sort of summary point I would offer on that one to the team.
Good stuff. And slight change of direction. This is more of a IBM focused question. And this one is, how have IBM factored AI advancements into future workforce capability planning? So we're trying, piloting. I mean, the subject of our discussion today is not about agility or agile organizations, but all organizations are also having to become more agile. And what that means to me is that we have to be more willing to try things and to pilot things and to experiment. So as a big organization, we are doing that. So we're looking at recruiting, onboarding, performance management, learning. We're looking at career coaches. We're looking at personality insights, at Watson tone, at payroll,
at Cogni-Pay, which is using artificial intelligence to figure out patterns in pay that allow you to make instant decisions as an organization instead of using the big planning cycles. So we're already adopting a lot of these things. We're also using these things with our own clients because I think there will be wide adoption of them. And it is influencing the cycle time, the way we do things, the skills in the HR function as people shift from doing some of these tasks to adopt different and higher value skills where the insights that you have from data and Watson capabilities can allow you to predict things and to offer interventions where maybe before you were more of a reporter of data or a reporter of the news. So I think the shift here is influence is changing. You become predictive and predictors. You are able to be to intervene and to take action where before much of what you did was after the fact. You knew what went wrong or what wasn't right, and then you tried to put it right for a next cycle rather than making changes in an agile fashion immediately.
Great, thank you. And the next one actually is similar in regards to tools and applications. So we've obviously touched upon Watson on one part, but the question here is around, do you have any examples for visionary applications that actually already use AI in the HR process? The supplement to this question was, what problem was solved using AI, and how it was solved?
So, that's probably a question that's going to take us way beyond the time that's here. I think, let me go back to some of these categorizations that I had earlier. I think you start by breaking into the cycle of AI somewhere, a bit like those aspirationals or tacticians. You have to decide that you want to try this out. If you're a small organization of 30 or 40 people, then maybe AI in an HR sense isn't what you need. If you're a large organization, multidisciplined, multi-country, portfolio with lots of different kinds of employees, then I think that you probably have huge amounts of data that you can get to work on to look at where value could be added. With such a large number of people, our hiring, our development, our onboarding has definitely been something we wanted to do. If I also look at the kind of HR advisors and the HR partners in the business, then we're able to add and infuse some of the technology into the roles that they have and to remove some of the administration, the data generation, the reporting, and to offer insights that make them more influential. And forever and a day, I've heard HR people talk about wanting to have a seat at the board table and also being able to take some of the admin away from them. But what I see as a trend is organizations and individuals becoming self-sufficiency. It's a great starting point to support the data that you have. And come on, in the last 10 years, if all of us have been around, we're experiencing technology in our personal lives, and that's making us able to do more in the workplace. So why should we have all of these systems and tools and different sign-ons and different applications that actually can be automated and can be dealt with almost on a self-service basis?
Right, and moving on to the next question, which actually some people could refer to as a boring topic potentially, but it's obviously incredibly important, especially in the age of data, AI, and all those components, and that's on GDPR. And
Sure.
obviously, which is coming into play, in the next month. And the question on GDPR here is: are there any concerns about how GDPR will affect the use and availability of the data, much of which could be personal?
Yeah, I mean, the answer to that is no, and I'm not trying to answer the question with a smart response here, but we need to remember that all organizations will have to be GDPR compliant, and consequently all tools, all technologies, the way data is handled and shared will have to be compliant. So I'm not concerned that we have an emerging technology that won't be compliant with GDPR and other requirements. That is something that can easily be built in. In fact, I suspect AI could probably do a lot to demystify many of the details around things like GDPR and other laws and other policies and other tax information and accounting information that's codified. All of that stuff should actually be better and more enabled through technology like this.
Okay, and final question of the day, which actually covers probably one of the hottest topics, and that's around worker experience, employee engagement, which you cited earlier in part of your discussion. And the question here is: what would you say is the impact of AI on employee engagement? Would that be positive?
Yes, it would be, because first of all, a lot of organizations are dealing with tools and technology that are old, that may be from some time ago, and particularly HR teams and HR departments, which can often be the poor relation on investment. So where AI makes things exciting is it starts to bring experiences and capabilities that we have outside into the workplace. Technology you can talk to, technology you can ask questions of, not have to have a language for, not have to have a code for. It is helping engagement because it makes people feel good about being in the organization and being serviced in better ways, in faster ways, in smarter ways, and in more fun and enjoyable ways. If you think about the games industry and gamification, the ability to make the technology interact, to give it persona, to allow it to have personality. All of these things are coming our way. And, in answer to the last question, which is a big one, don't be afraid of it. Embrace it. Try it. You may like it, you may enjoy it, and you'll certainly have a lot of fun with it.
Excellent. Nice way to finish. I like the I like the quote there, "Don't be afraid, embrace it," was a good summary there, Gary. That brings all the questions to a close. Are there any thoughts from yourself to just round off the discussion?
No, I mean, look, a good discussion, a big topic, and we owe it to ourselves. We owe it to ourselves to, I think, get deeper on the subject, to understand it better, to have a point of view on it, and to be able to look at ways in which we can introduce it within our organization. So, it's not about a future that is 10 or 15 years ago. In some respects, the future is happening, right now. Right now. Thank you so much, Edwin, and thanks to everyone who's still on the line and listening. I really appreciate the chance to do this, and I hope if there are questions that come later, we can find a way of getting answers. So, Edwin, team, thank you, and everyone who's joined and taken time out of the day, thank you very much indeed.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Gary. And with for myself, just a quick summary on a few points, key statements, I think, from earlier on, if you may have tuned in a bit late. I think point one was leverage expertise and potential. This is about supporting, augmenting, not replacing humans. That's really critical. The newest member of your team in HR could be a chatbot. 2/3 of employees are comfortable accessing bots, so look at how it's going to fit into the workflow of your applications. Principles, again, is a term that's been used. The change in technology has implications, so we do require more openness, research, and things will transform for the better, but you fundamentally have to be clear on those principles. And you mentioned Josh Burson. He has some of the world-renowned research on obviously learning and development and other factors. I saw him talk at HRD Summit earlier in the year, and if you haven't checked out his material, please do. And then finally, closing statement with what Gary mentioned. The workforce is facing huge, companies are facing huge business problems as we become ever more complex, and organizations really need to shift and to create improved and better experiences based on employee expectations. And with that, I wanted to close off the session. Thank you to all the attendees for listening in. Hope you got some actionable tips, takeaways, and ideas to go back into the office. Thanks naturally to Gary, great insights, and appreciate your time. And obviously tune in to check out our next webinar in the series. And if you are thinking about when the materials will come, as I said at the start, you'll receive the link to the recording within 24 hours. So with that, thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.